Thank you. So I'll now provide some background information on the CNSC as an introduction to this presentation, and I'll then hand it over to my colleagues who will speak more specifically on about the license renewal process for the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. So we can go on to the next slide, please. So our mandate. Now the CNSC regulates to prevent unreasonable risk to the environment, to the health and safety of Canadians, and national security. We've been overseeing nuclear safety in Canada for 75 years. Originally created as the Atomic Energy Control Board in 1946, we became the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission in the year 2000 through the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. Now, our mandate, as described in the Nuclear Safety Control Act, defines what the CNSC is responsible for. Now, the CNSC is the sole authority in Canada to regulate the development, production, and use of nuclear energy, the production, possession, and the use of nuclear substances, prescribed equipment, and prescribed information in order to prevent unreasonable risk. Now, as illustrated on this slide, the CNSC mandate has three pillars. The first is to regulate the use of nuclear energy and materials to protect the health, safety, security, and environment for Canadians. The second is to implement Canada's international commitments on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Thirdly, and somewhat unique amongst Canadian regulators, government agencies, and departments, is a mandate to disseminate objective, scientific, technical, and regulatory information to the public and Indigenous peoples. And as such, the CNSC considers outreach as what we're doing today to be the core of its daily work. Now, the CNSC does not promote nuclear activities, but it is in the CNSC's job to safely regulate such activity. I think we move on to the next slide, please. So in this slide, I'd like to highlight the activities that do not fall under the CNSC's mandate. Now, the CNSC's primary concern has always been and will always be safety. A license will only be granted if the Commission is convinced that the applicant will conduct the license activity safely. As already stated, the CNSC is not responsible for the promotion of nuclear energy or any nuclear use. We do have a very informed opinion on the safe use of nuclear energy and materials. Crown Consultation Coordinator is under our mandate, but issues pertaining to Indigenous rights and treaty determination are not. Now, the CNSC also does not determine or have a voice in the energy mix decided on by the provinces. But if the energy is nuclear, it is then the CNSC's job to regulate. The federal and provincial waste policies regarding the safe storage of nuclear waste is also not in our mandate. We are the regulator that does and will continue to oversee activities at nuclear waste facilities. Finally, site selection or technologies to be used in license activities are also outside of our mandate. Okay, we can move to the next slide, please. So the CNSC is the regulatory body responsible for the oversight of all nuclear-related activity in Canada. The CNSC regulates the mining of uranium and the processing of uranium into fuel that is used in Canada's nuclear power plants. We also regulate the transportation of nuclear materials. The dosimetry industry, nuclear research, and all nuclear and medical applications, both diagnostic and therapeutic, fall under the CNSC control as well. And of course, the CNSC regulates nuclear power plants as well as all radioactive waste in Canada. And Point Lepreau resides in this grouping. Okay, we're ready to move to the next slide, please. So the CNSC has a robust regulatory framework that details the documents that outline the CNSC's approach to regulating nuclear energy. Now, the framework combines all the existing documents and document projects in a clear and logical manner according to regulated facilities and activities, safety control areas, and other areas of regulatory interest. It also includes a structured, comprehensive suite of regulatory instruments that are used to achieve CNSC's mandate. Now, starting from the top, the Nuclear Safety and Control Act establishes the Commission, sets out its mandate, and establishes its authority to regulate the development, production, and the use of nuclear energy, and the production and possession and the use of nuclear substances, prescribed equipment, and prescribed information in Canada. Now, under the Act, the Commission may make regulations which set out requirements. Licensees or applicants must meet these requirements to obtain or retain a license or certificate to use nuclear materials or operate a nuclear facility. Licenses and certificates set out more specific legally binding requirements for each licensee to which the CNSC will expect compliance. Regulatory documents, or otherwise known as reg docs, provide greater detail than regulations as to what the licensees and applicants must achieve in order to meet the CNSC's regulatory requirements, and may provide practical guidance on how to meet the regulatory requirements of the CNSC. Now, the CNSC continuously reviews and adjusts its regulatory framework to ensure that regulatory requirements are modern, clear, supported by guidance where necessary, and that the CNSC is ready to regulate new and emerging technologies. Finally, our framework also takes into account international best practices and aligns with the IAEA safety fundamentals and safety requirements. Next slide, please. Now, the Commission. The Commission is an independent, quasi-judicial administrative tribunal that is arm's length from the government. An important characteristic of the Commission is that, unlike most government departments or agencies, they do not report to a minister. Rather, the CNSC Commission reports directly to Parliament through the Minister of Natural Resources. It is an important distinction and increases the independence of the Commission. Now, the Commission is composed of up to 7 members who are appointed by Governor and Council based on their qualifications and expertise. And the Commission proceedings are open to everyone and webcast live. Any input from Indigenous peoples, the public, and stakeholders are always welcome. All Commission decisions are transparent and based on the information received before and during the hearings provided by the proponent, CNSC staff, and interveners. Now, the record of proceedings includes detailed reasons on why a license is or is not granted and is available on the CNSC website. Next slide, please. Now, as mentioned, the decision-making of the Commission is supported by recommendations of CNSC staff. Now, there are approximately 800 scientific, technical, and professional staff that work in various functions to fulfill this important role of making recommendations to the Commission to support their decision-making. Equally important, CNSC staff conduct assessments on the information submitted by applicants and licensees to verify that they meet the requirements. They also implement Commission decisions. The staff develop regulatory requirements and guidance for Commission approval. They verify and enforce compliance with regulatory requirements. And finally, CNSC staff engage the public and Indigenous groups through outreach activities. Move on to the next slide, please. Now, on this slide, is to distinguish the responsibilities between the CNSC and the licensee. Now, I'll start with the responsibilities of the licensee. Licensees are directly responsible for managing regulated activities in a manner that protects health, safety, security, and the environment, and that conforms with Canada's domestic and international obligations on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Now, the CNSC is accountable to Parliament and to Canadians for assuring that these responsibilities are properly discharged. The CNSC therefore ensures that regulated parties are informed about the requirements and provided with guidance on how to meet them, and then verifies that all regulatory requirements are and continue to be met. When doing all of this, the CNSC makes independent, objective, and risk-informed decisions. And it's important to mention that this regulatory philosophy aligns with the International Atomic Energy Safety Fundamentals. Now, that ends the introductory overview section of the presentation. I'll now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Patrick Collins, in the Port Lepreau location to present the next section of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. As mentioned earlier, nuclear activities in Canada are licensed by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. That means an individual or an organization must apply to the CNSC to obtain a license for nuclear material. The last time NB Power applied for a renewal of their operating license was in 2016. In 2017, the Commission determined that NB Power met regulatory requirements to continue operation of the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station until June 30th of this year. In June 2021, NB Power submitted their application to renew their operating license for a period of 25 years. This slide is a brief overview of the timeline associated with the Point Lepreau renewal project. In the subsequent slides, I'll discuss more details for each of these milestones. In June 30th of last year, NV Power submitted to the CNSC Commission Registry a request to renew the power reactor operating license for Point Lepreau. This license application is currently posted on NV Power's website. The CNSC is hosting 2 public hearings to consider the request to renew the Point Lepreau operating license. The Part 1 Commission hearing occurred on January 26th of this year and was held virtually over Zoom due to COVID-19 restrictions. An archive of the webcast along with the transcript can be found on the CNSC website at nuclearsafety.gc.ca under the Commission tab and Public Commission Hearings link. The Part 2 Commission hearing is scheduled to take place in the St. John area on May 11th and 12th of this year. However, similar to Part 1 hearing, the Commission Registry may decide to hold a second virtual hearing due to COVID-19 restrictions. But as provincial restrictions are easing across Canada, it is expected that the Commission Registry will make a final decision whether to hold a virtual Commission hearing or one in person sometime in the near future. Public interventions, which will be discussed later on, are due to the Commission Registry March 28th at the end of this month. Moving on to this slide, CNSC staff conducted technical assessment of NV Power's license renewal application to determine if it meets the regulatory requirements of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, its associated regulations, and CNSC requirements. NV Power submitted their application and supporting information in accordance with Regulatory Document 1.1.3, License Application Guide, License to Operate a Nuclear Power Plant. CNSC staff reviewed NV Power's license renewal application and confirmed that it was complete and contained sufficient supporting information to demonstrate that an adequate licensing basis has been established in each safety and control area to support continued operations. Safety and control areas are technical topics used by the CNSC staff across all regulated facilities and activities to assess, evaluate, review, verify, and report on regulatory requirements and safety performance. The CNSC staff assessments includes inputs from federal and provincial government departments, including those responsible for regulating the health and safety, that'd be Health Canada, environmental protection, Environment and Climate Change Canada, emergency preparedness, NBEMO, or New Brunswick Emergency Measures Organization, and conventional health and safety, WorkSafe New Brunswick, along with others. CNSC staff assessed NV Power's performance during the current licensing term to confirm compliance with applicable requirements. CNSC staff confirmed that NV Power's performance was satisfactory and demonstrated a trend of stable performance throughout the licensing period. CNSC staff note that NV Power's historical performance indicates that they will continue to comply with applicable regulatory requirements. The CNSC staff commission member document, or CMD, is available online from the CNSC website, nuclearsafety.gc.ca. And again, it could be found under the commission link and public commission hearings. The results from the technical assessment are used as inputs to the CNSC staff CMD. The following major conclusions were made by CNSC staff in the CMD. NV Power effectively managed the impact of COVID-19. CNSC staff worked with WorkSafe New Brunswick to ensure that New Brunswick Power modified their processes to include the latest information from the Chief Medical Officer of New Brunswick. NV Power followed their process to maintain a sufficient number of qualified staff. Radiation doses and radiological releases are well below regulatory limits. Safety analysis was updated and considered the impact of aging effects. Components, structures, and systems remain fit for service at Point Lepreau. MB Power has an effective management system to protect workers, the public, and the environment. Based on MB Power's license application, supporting information, and safety performance, CNSC staff is recommending to the Commission that a 20-year power reactor operating license be granted to New Brunswick Power Corporation to operate the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. More information regarding these conclusions, again, are discussed in the CNSC staff CMD. So there are a couple of ways to attend the Commission hearing. You could do so by watching online or attending in person. Please note that due to COVID-19, only virtual meetings will be held until further notice. Notices of public hearings are posted under the Commission's link on the CNSC website. From this link, you could browse for hearings by date and by licensee. On the date of a hearing, a webcast link will be posted on the main website. You can also actively participate in a public hearing. This is called an intervention. Members of the public who have an interest or expertise in the matter being considered, or who have information that may be useful to the Commission, can formally participate as interveners. Interventions may be either a written submission or a written submission accompanied by a presentation to the Commission. Commission members read all written submissions before a public hearing, and during the hearing may use information from the submission to ask the CNSC staff or the applicant. If an intervener chooses to present to the Commission, a written submission also has to accompany the presentation. The maximum length for each presentation is limited to 10 minutes, followed by an opportunity for the Commission members to ask follow-up questions on that presentation. As stated earlier, for the Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station license renewal hearing, Part 1 was held on January 26th. You can rewatch the hearing by visiting nuclearsafety.gc.ca. The main focus of the Part 2 hearing is for the Commission to account for new information brought forward by interventions. In order to give the Commission members enough time to read each intervention, a due date of March 28th, 2022 has been established. For general information on how you can observe or participate in a public hearing, please visit the CNSC website. For more specific information or questions, please reach out to the Commission Registry or the Interventions email address, which can also be found on the CNSC website. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Peter. I will turn it over to the next polling question. We'll put up polling question number 3 with regard to the presentation. So after the presentation, how would you rate your understanding of the power reactor operating license for the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station? Okay, we'll end the poll there, post the results. Excellent. Looks like we may have had some improvement there on the understanding for the power reactor operating license at Point Lepreau. We will move on to our next polling question number 4. Which of the following topics did you find useful? You're welcome to select more than one answer. right, give it a couple more seconds. So for these answers, we'll use these as we get into upcoming webinars as well. For those who did mark other, there is a feedback form afterwards that if you'd like to give us some other suggestions, that would be very helpful. So thank you very much. So now we're going to move into our question and answer session. The questions can be typed in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We'll do our best to answer the questions that come our way. For questions that are not answered, please send them to our information account email address that's found on our website, and we'll do our best to get some answers for you. And just see if anybody's got any questions so far. Feel free to type in any questions that you think we might be able to answer. We do have a number of individuals around on the panel that might be able to answer the question. All right. So our first question is, how does the CNSC determine compliance with regulations of licensees? And I'll ask that Mr. Patrick Collins give an answer for that. Thank you, Patrick.
Hi there, thanks for the question. It goes back to the license and the licensing basis. So the commission approves a power reactor operating license, such as they did in 2017 for New Brunswick Power to operate the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. And that license it's a list of license conditions that the operator must operate the station within a certain boundary. We have physical inspectors on site that conduct surveillance and monitoring activities along with inspections. And also in Ottawa, we have subject matter experts that are specialized in the specific areas across the safety and control areas. And they also contribute to technical assessments on any changes or to a licensee specific program, or just regular inspections based across those 14 safety and control areas.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We have another question. Have the CNSC granted license to others for 20 or 25 years? And I'll ask Ms. Anu Balkan to answer that question. Sorry, Anu, I don't think we can't hear you.
I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Anu.
Sorry about that. So with respect to the question, currently the Commission has issued up to 10 years for nuclear power plant facilities. However, at this time, there are a few applications before the Commission for a variety of facilities. One is a tritium management facility and the other is the Point Lepreau facility, where they're being asked to consider license terms longer than 10 years.
Thank you very much, Anu. Next question. Let me see. What was the basis for the CNSC recommendation to grant renewal for 20 years and not 25 years as requested? And I'll ask that Mr. Patrick Collins answer this question.
Thanks for the question. It's a good question. So just to clarify, CNSC staff is making the recommendation to the commission. We have not granted a 20-year license. It's just a recommendation that we're making. But on that note, the decisions that went in to come up with that recommendation were based on MB Power's past safety performance. They've continuously rated satisfactory as they met all of their license obligations, and they remained within their licensing basis at all times. And then the application itself. So we are familiar with MB Power as we currently regulate the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. As mentioned earlier, we have a pretty rigorous compliance activities that we conduct to ensure that they stay within their boundary. And a part of that is conducting audits on a lot of their processes and programs, including documentation and any records that they keep. And so CNSC staff, we reviewed their license application and their supplemental information to support that application. And there were no major new differences in their processes and how they will conduct their operations. So really it's about, there were no major changes in their application, and we're not forecasting any major changes on how they will continue to operate over the next 20 years or so. CNSC staff made the recommendation to renew the license for a term of 20 years based on the approximate original design life of a refurbished nuclear power plant, which is 30 years. So in 2012, the commission provided a license to refuel the reactor and begin operations after refurbishment. And here we are in 2022, so that's 10 years has elapsed. And then going forward, 2042 would be the original design life of that facility. So that's where our recommendation landed with that 20-year mark.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And so our next question will go to Ms. New Balkan. And the question is, does this mean that the nuclear power station will be decommissioned after 25 years? And if not, what is the life expectancy for the station?
Thanks, Heather. At this time, Point Lepreau has not indicated to us what their plans are after 25 years. CNSC staff are recommending a license renewal of up to 20 years. At that point, we would expect that Point Lepreau would indicate to the commission their intention to either enter into the end of commercial operations, which would lead to decommissioning, or maybe a refurbishment. But that is not something that has been discussed as yet or has been indicated within the current application. That any change to the authorized activities under the license would have to be discussed with the commission, and the commission would have to grant approval prior to that activity taking place. In terms of the life expectancy of the station, I believe Mr. Collins has spoken quite extensively to that, but just to reiterate, the current design life is at 30 years. However, that does not mean that that current assessment or estimate of that life cannot be reassessed based on current information, operating experience, or real-time information that's gathered through things like inspections.
We have a few more questions coming in. I'm just letting them come in, and I feel free to also add some more questions. All right, our next question. The next question is the tritium content of the moderator and the heat transport system increases over time. Is there an upper limit? And I'll pass the question off to Ms. Anu Balkan.
There is a limit on the tritium content within the moderator and the heat transport system. Those limits are outlined within the license conditions handbook. That document essentially is intended to be read in conjunction with the license that the commission grants. That the license conditions handbook outlines requirements such as compliance verification criteria, as well as guidance on how the licensee can meet the conditions of the license. In terms of the limit for the moderator and the heat transport system, those are determined based on safety analysis, and a safety analysis limit is set, as well as an operating limit that would essentially try to control that limit before it gets into the safety analysis limit. Those limits are something that CNSC staff verify and confirm that the licensee continues to meet, and that if they are encroaching upon that limit, that they are taking action to correct the situation. It is also our understanding that Point Lepreau is intending to embark upon a project to clean up the tritium content within the moderator as well.
Thank you very much, Anu. And again, please feel free to send in a few more questions. All right, so the next question is going to go to Mr. Patrick Collins, and it will build off some questions with regards to compliance that he's already has answered. So the question is, will the licensee be required to periodically report to the CNSC on how the station has been operated and met the compliance requirements? And I'll turn that answer over to Mr. Patrick Collins.
Yes, thank you. So there are definitely reporting requirements that the licensee has that can be found in our regulatory document 3.1.1 for all of those reporting requirements. In terms of the steam generators, if that was the question, they were not replaced in the past refurbishment. That is correct. That's because MB Power, they were able to provide to the CNSC that they have sufficient safety margin in regards to their boilers. They have a fairly advanced aging management process that accounts for this. And also overall, Point Lepreau's heat transport system is fairly clean, and the chemistry of the boilers at that time provided enough safety margin. So as that margin, if it does decrease over time, that does get reported to CNSC. That's under the pressure boundary program, as well as CNSC site staff and subject matter experts conduct inspections on not only the aging management process, but also they look at records from any inspections that are conducted on the boilers or the steam generators themselves. I should note that we do have a tool in our regulatory framework. It's regulatory document 2.3.3, which is called periodic safety reviews. And what that requires the licensee to do is to bring every 10 years to make sure that they are meeting modern codes and standards. So it's not like the commission issues a license and we just track the plant over time. The plant constantly or continuously has to be brought up to these modern codes and standards in a reasonable way as well.
Thank you very much, Patrick. In addition to this, we also had a question will the licensee be required to periodically report to the CNSC on how the station has been operated and met the compliance requirements? So the CNSC continuously provides regulatory oversight and confirms the safe operation of the facility. And throughout the year, at every commission meeting, there's a status report on our power reactors that updates the commission on the information for the currently operating stations. There's also an annual regulatory oversight report for the nuclear power plants, which reports the regulatory oversight that is completed through that year and the performance for that particular year. The regulatory oversight process allows for written interventions by Indigenous nations and communities and members of public and interested stakeholders, and is a good way for the public to continue to be involved with the regulatory process. As well, we also have routine reports that are sent to the CNSC, a CNSC staff review quarterly, on a quarterly and an annually basis, which reports on regular information that to ensure that compliance expectations are being met. Areas include pressure boundary, environmental protection, reliability, and fuel monitoring. Thank you. We had one question. Will the webinar be recorded and made available to the public? And I'll ask that Peter answers that question. My apologies. Tiffany?
Hello, everyone. So we are currently looking at posting options, but as of right now, that is still being explored, but a copy of the presentation will be sent to all participants after the webinar. And if there are any follow-up questions or concerns, feel free to email us.
Thank you, Tiffany. We have another question here. Do CNSC inspectors have a regular program of frequent visitation to the site? And how do you ensure that the classification and transport are handled according to regulations? So we have 6 full-time inspectors who work at the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. All 6 individuals live here in the St. John area, and our permanent posting is here at Point Lepreau. We are continuously at site conducting inspections and have been throughout the entirety of the COVID pandemic. We continue to do inspections. We have a baseline inspection program that we follow to ensure compliance with our requirements and our regulations. And these, I mentioned earlier about the regulatory oversight report, these compliance activities are summarized in the regulatory oversight report and presented to the Commission, and the safety areas ratings are provided that show safe operation of the station. In terms of transportation of radioactive materials, we do have inspections that we conduct in this area to ensure that the requirements and the regulations are being met and being followed. Thank you. All right, I see Adam Levine. I'm going to hand a question to Mr. Adam Levine. The question is, you mentioned something along the lines of Indigenous determinations are outside the CNSC mandates, but can you establish conditions that require additional investigations into issues outside of the mandates?
Hi there, can you hear me?
I can, thank you, Adam.
No worries. Hi, everyone. So my name is Adam Levine. I'm the team lead for Indigenous Relations and Participant Funding at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So what we're trying to say in the presentation around we don't make determinations is around determinations around claims and rights and things like that. We don't have powers around determining whether a specific Indigenous nation or community has a specific right or whether a specific claim, a treaty claim, etc., is valid or not. That's something, you know, that is dealt with through Crown Indigenous Affairs and other organizations or through the court system. What we do is that no matter what's going on, we always put a lens through. We want to ensure that Indigenous nations and communities are consulted, actively engaged and involved in everything that we do, including license renewals and commission hearing processes. And so our mandate is very clear in terms of the safety aspect, and also very clear in terms of our role as an agent of the Crown. So whenever the CNSC is making a decision or there's a project before the commission that could raise the duty to consult, that could have potential impacts on the exercise of rights, then we have a fulsome process to consult Indigenous nations and communities around that. So so I just want to make sure that's clear in terms of what we meant by we don't do rights determinations, but we do meet our duty to consult and accommodate obligations. So hope that helps, and happy to provide more information if there's further questions.
Thank you, Adam. We do have another question. Is it possible that the license period be reduced to less than what is the granted period if there are concerns? And I will ask Ms. Anu Balkan to answer this question.
In terms of regulatory oversight, CNSC staff do have a robust regulatory program in place that allows us to use many different tools to address any concerns or trends in declining performance, any safety significant concerns that may emerge. As such, we can be very responsive and take more immediate actions to correct those concerns. However, ultimately, should it get to a level where it does have to go to the commission, it is quite possible that the period can be adjusted. The commission essentially retains the right through legislation to amend or revoke a license at any time.
Thank you very much, Anu. Right. Another question here. Earlier, I had discussed, are the quarterly reports you mentioned available to the public? These are not necessarily directly available to the public. However, they can be requested through our information line via our email. Otherwise, these reports are discussed and summarized in the regulatory oversight report that is presented annually to the Commission. Thank you. Next question, I'm going to hand off to Tiffany. Can we receive a transcript for today's webinar, including the Q's and A's with responses?
So thank you, Heather. Unfortunately, the session is not live transcribed, but as mentioned before, the recording is done for future posting options. In terms of the Q's and A's, we have allocated an hour and a half to kind of go through the questions that you have. So we really encourage you to ask those questions live during our session. Any other questions that you may have afterwards, feel free to give them to us via the info account as well.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. We do have a question here that discusses, in the view of environmental concerns globally, and in the demand for industry to be more transparent, where can I access information on how hazardous Lepreau is to the local environment? And I will ask that Mr. Patrick Collins discuss this answer. Thank you.
Hi there. So in terms of the environmental concerns in and around the plant, NB Power does have an environmental monitoring program where they do take samples of the environment on a daily basis, and also I believe it's every 2 weeks. in and around the Point Lepreau area. So the daily basis checks are more contained to site, but their 2-week checks are more outside of the boundaries of the site. Those reports, those samples get analyzed in their Fredericton lab, and those results are also reported to CNSC staff. In terms of the independence to that, CNSC staff, we do have an independent environmental monitoring program where we were just in and around the community at Point Lepreau in 2020 and 2021. And we were taking samples of grass, air, soil, water, periwinkles, various samples within the area. And you could see that those samples and the results of those samples, they're posted on our CNSC website under Independent Environmental Monitoring Program. So what happens when we as CNSC staff take those samples, we ship them off to our lab in Ottawa, and they process those samples and create those reports as well.
Thank you, Patrick. We have another question here. I'm going to ask Ms. Anu Balkan to answer. You said the commission reports to the Parliament through the Minister of Natural Resources. How does this work? Does the minister pass your report on in its entirety, or add comments before sending, or summarize your report to another, or is there another approach? Thank you.
Thank you. So the CNSC reports directly to Parliament. However, as just based on the way the federal government is set up, the CNSC requires a mechanism that they can use, and that mechanism is to administratively report through the Minister of Natural Resources. However, it's not a it's not a reporting relationship where we report to the minister. We are completely independent of the Ministry of Natural Resources. We report directly to Parliament. The mechanism of submitting our reports is simply an administrative one, which means that the minister does not provide comments or input on our work.
All right. The next question I will pass on to Mr. Patrick Collins. The question is there a significant economic benefit associated with the extra 5 years requested by PLNGS or NB Power? Thank you.
So to be quite clear, we as the CNSC and CNSC staff, we don't really look at the economic benefits in behind the decision for NB Power to go in for a 25-year license. We base this on our own assessment of their safety performance, and then also the original OEM design life after refurbishment. That's primarily what our decision was based on for that 20 years recommendation to the commission.
All right. Next question is going to go to Tiffany. There's just a couple more questions here with regards to the webinar itself. Are we going to receive a link to the webinar? And the other one is, will there be a Q&A summary provided along with the presentation deck?
So in terms of the link to the webinar, as mentioned by Peter before, it is recorded by just for our internal use at the moment. We are looking at posting options, but that will come later. In terms of the Q's and A's, unfortunately, the list of that will not be provided, as we aim to provide all answers live during this webinar platform.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. If there are more questions or if there's any clarity that's needed with any of the answers we've already given, please feel free to add that to the questions. If anything we've given for an answer isn't what you were looking for, or maybe you need a little bit clarity on further on the answer, please let us know and we can attempt to answer it a little bit further. So the next question. Let me see here. Is with regards to access to information. And I'm going to ask that Ms. Megan Garish answer this question. The question is around accessibility and transparency of information with regards to the in preparation for the Part 2 hearing. Interventions are due by March 28th. How the ease of getting information to the public. I'll pass that over to Megan Garish.
Hi there, my name is Megan Garish. I work for communications for the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Absolutely, we encourage all members of the public to get involved by submitting an intervention online, and you can do that to the secretariat, to the registry, and you can submit your intervention that formally online to participate in the hearing process. In terms of information available on the website, we work very hard to be as transparent as possible and to have as much information as possible available in plain language to share with members of the public. In addition, you would see we have circulated mail drops to those living within the community within 70 kilometers of the Point Lepreau generating station to alert members of the public to this hearing process and to get some engagement that way. And certainly you're encouraged to reach us through our info account inquiries, which is available on the slides here. I believe the contact information is available there. And feel free to send an email at any time, and we will work as quickly as possible to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Megan. There's another question here on tritium. The understanding is tritium cannot be cleaned from the water because it's actually a form of hydrogen, which is a major component in water. And so they're looking for a little bit more information here. Did I miss your response on how you measure and address tritium levels? And I'll ask Mr. Alex Victroff to provide some further information.
Yeah, so indeed, tritium is one of the isotopes of hydrogen, so it's behaving pretty much as a regular hydrogen. It's making it difficult to separate tritiated water from regular water, but it's possible. It's a complex, slow, inefficient process, but technology exists. And in case of need, when the Lepreau drums tritiated water, sends it to OPG facilities in Ontario, where it can be processed and tritium could be extracted, which in itself is an important component in some activities that is not a waste. It can be commercially utilized. So technology exists, and it's a balance whether it's efficient to do so, or whether it's safe to do so, and could be done.
Thank you very much, Alex. Hopefully that answers the question. If there's further question, please let us know if there's more clarity that's needed with regards to that item. If there's any other questions, please send them through to us. Any questions that are not really in scope of the license renewal, or any questions that you'd like to get answered or answered further, please do reach out to our information email that's on our website. We do have a little more time here if we want to ask a few further questions. Okay, there's a question here. Okay, so if I understand it correctly, the decision for creation of nuclear waste is not under the CNSC mandate, although the CNSC must oversee safety concerns for nuclear waste. So the question that they're asking is, SMNRs will produce an unusual nuclear waste stream. So the individual is wondering how a decision to license an SMNR at Point Lepreau can avoid considering the waste stream when it decides whether to license an SMNR plant. And I'll ask Mr. Alex Victroff to give an answer for that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Several considerations here. First of all, please keep in mind that in the current matter in front of the Commission to relicense the Point Lepreau facility, small modular reactors are not considered. It's not part of the license application at all. So that's outside of the scope of the matter in front of the Commission, and in a way out of the scope of this discussion. Nevertheless, we understand the public interest in this. So I will assure you that should a small reactor be considered for placing at the site, then waste stream will certainly be considered as part of the safety considerations. This is not something that can be avoided. Please be assured that production of waste at any future facility will be part of the considerations. But still, I will go back to my first point. At this time, that's not a matter that we are considering.
Thank you, Alex. Next question, further information or questions about tritium. In terms of a tritium scrub option, is it being used anywhere in Canada? The individual has concerns with regards to tritium in their area. Thank you.
I'm assuming that question is for me, Heather. So I'll just jump in. So the tritium removal option is currently being used in Canada. There is a tritium removal facility in Ontario, and that facility is intended to support the Darlington nuclear generating station. However, they also accept heavy water from other nuclear power plant facilities, remove the tritium from that heavy water and return the water back to those plants.
Thank you very much, Anu. We have a question here. Are the evidence packages for NB Power and CNSC staff available online at the CNSC site? And can we post a link? I'll pass this question on to Mr. Patrick Collins.
Yes, thank you for that. So yeah, the CNSC, we do have a specific website where the staff CMD and NB Power's CMD operating application was posted. We could definitely pass that link along.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I think that covers all the questions so far. Like I say, we do have a little bit of time left if anybody has anything you'd like to ask, or if there's any clarification regarding any of the answers we've given thus far.
Sorry, if I may, maybe we are not quite clear about the tritium. The tritium content in water in rivers, lakes, ocean are monitored, and they're extremely low. There's no possible need to try and clean tritium, clean water to extract tritium from the environmental sources. There is a question of extracting tritium from some water that is used at the plant and which is strictly controlled to prevent loss of such water. And the community concerns about tritium concentration in water probably relate to water like drinking water, water used in households. Again, that water contamination levels is strictly controlled, and tritium levels in the water is extremely low. And the tritium can only be encountered at the facility itself, and there it's measured, and the levels are strictly monitored. I hope that clarifies if we were not quite clear before.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think that was helpful. All right. We do have another further question. Likely could be answered either continued by Alex or maybe Anu. And if not, maybe we can find an answer for it. How exactly is the heavy water cleaned, and how is it transported?
Well, maybe I'll take the first half of the question. Cleaning of heavy water of tritium is relying on the different speed of chemical processes, chemical reactions. So tritium as a heavy isotope of hydrogen reacts at a slightly different speed than light hydrogen or deuterium. And the difference in the reaction is used to segregate different isotopes of tritium. But the exact chemistry of the process, that's something that we would need to look into, and we could provide additional information if there is interest.
Go ahead, Anu.
In terms of how it is transported, the tritiated heavy water is transported by road, and it is placed within approved packaging. Those packaging materials and the containers that it is placed within, they have to meet specific packaging and transport requirements. The CNSC, we do have our staff that confirm through inspections that, whether it's Point Lepreau or another nuclear power plant, that they are meeting those requirements before shipping those containers off site. Or rather transporting them. At that point, Transport Canada also has rules and regulations around how to transport these packages from site to site.
Thank you very much, Anu. All right. Give it a couple minutes, see if there's any other questions that come to mind. We do have one more polling question, but we will give it a couple more minutes before we close things out just to see if there's any other questions that pop up. With that said, if you do have a question that comes to you after the fact, please do reach out to our information email address. Otherwise, to email your questions. We do encourage that all that are interested get involved with the upcoming CNSC Commission hearing starting in May 11th. Please have a look at our website, nuclearsafety.gc.ca, for details on the hearing and how to intervene in the hearing, as well how to watch the hearing if you choose not to intervene, but would rather just watch the hearing. There's all kinds of information on our website with regards to that. If you are interested in reading the transcript from the Part 1 hearing, this is also posted on our website. That Part 1 hearing was held on January 26th. And as well, just wanted to note that the deadline for interventions is March 28th of 2022. And I don't see any further questions here and no new questions. So I will ask that we put out the final polling question. All right. Okay, give it a couple more seconds and then we'll post the results. All right, so we'll post the polling results. We really appreciate the feedback. It looks like in general, individuals were happy with the answers to the questions. And again, if maybe there's further clarity or something that we didn't quite hit it right on the, right on, please do reach out to us and we can answer your question further or get you further information. After the webinar, there is a survey that will pop up. We really appreciate the feedback on the webinar to help make future webinars better. Please feel free to provide information in that feedback. I believe it all is anonymous and we really appreciate all of that. So I would like to take this time to thank you all for joining us. We had a really large crowd and a lot of panelists here available to answer questions. And I appreciate everybody was able to join us today. And I do encourage everyone to check out our website, nuclearsafety.gc.ca. There's a lot of great information there and to reach out if you do have further questions. Thank you and have a great day.